Biz Nexus community. My name is John Tangredi, and I'm here with Pete Ritchie. We're with the Move Group, and we're going to walk you through the topic of today, which is all about the importance of employee retention. But before that, we thought we'd give a quick introduction, so I'll hand it over to Pete to introduce himself, and then I'll follow up.
Yep, I'm Pete Ritchie, one of the managing directors here at Move Group. And my background, just to give a quick rundown, is started my career in the Army, but worked different businesses from startups to Fortune 500, Google, The Honest Company, raised money, have worked in a number of different capacities at the executive level, and then came over here to start Move Group with John.
Great, and my name again is John Tangredi. I'm also one of the co-founders, managing directors of the Move Group. And my career, I started in finance, worked for Citicorp for a number of years, and then also transitioned to startups, and then spent 20 years working in private equity and venture capital as a operating partner. So going in and operating companies that venture capital or private equity purchase, moving them through the next level of a transaction as they exit. So that's a little bit about us. We'll just quickly go through a little bit about what the Move Group does. So we are a boutique consulting firm, and we really focus on three things. We help companies in pre-sale support. So for companies that are looking to transition ownership, they might be retiring or they just want to move out of the business, we can help them get the company ready. Very similar to the way a real estate group would come in and stage your home. Having worked for venture capital, private equity, we know what these companies look for, and those things are very specific, so we can help with that. We also help with post-acquisition support. So if you've recently purchased a business, that first 100 days is critical to making sure that you don't lose momentum and that you keep the business performing and have a plan to really grow it, which is typically part of the reason why you bought the business, so we can help with that. And then we also developed a very extensive leadership development program, because ultimately it's all about people in most businesses. So that's what we specialize in. We also do general consulting, but that is primarily what the Move Group does. Okay, so our topics of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about three things. One is, what are the key components of an effective employee retention program? Two, how to manage key employees through an ownership transition. And then three is, what do you do when that key employee leaves? So we'll talk about all three of those. If for those of you that are live, if you have any questions, please feel free to add those into the comments, and we will do our best to answer all of those that we can. So let's get started. So first one, key components of an effective employee retention program. Number one, and we always say this is table stakes, you have to be competitive in your compensation and benefits. And I think everybody saw this in 2020, 2021, into 22 and 23, especially in healthcare, as the labor pool really shrunk and was competitive. If you were not competitive in your salaries and benefits, you can't attract good talent. So this is foundational. Once you get past that, I think the most important thing is effective communication. And the reality is that if you don't communicate, especially in an ownership transition, if you don't communicate very early on, immediately, about what your plan is, how you're going to advance the business, who's going to stay, who may not stay, if you don't do that, then the employees are going to do it on their own. And when employees don't have the correct story and they haven't been communicated, they're going to come up with their own story. And that's when you have people that just start to immediately create potentially confusion in the organization, and you're going to have to unwind that. So communication early on about what the plan is, how each employee, what their role is going to be in the plan, and moving it forward is very, very critical. Third one is performance management. I can't tell you how many businesses that we go into when we ask, hey, when's the last time you did employee reviews, or how often do you sit down with your employees and work on a performance plan with them, a management plan? And often it's, well, we don't do that, or we do it once a year. Your team wants feedback. They want to know how they're doing. They want to know what they can be working on. Those are all growth opportunities. So having a structure in place to be able to do that is very important. And that leads to the next one, which is career development. To retain your employees, they want to know that they have a future with the company. They want to see people promoted from the inside. They want to see and understand how they get to the next level. Is there room to move into management? How do they move up to supervisor roles? Part of that performance management plan, but part of a career development plan is letting them see those opportunities and working towards those. And then lastly, recognition and rewards. And everybody has different ways that they like to be recognized, but having a structure within your company where people see predictive and consistent recognition and rewards is really important and very effective from what I've seen.
One, just for me to circle back to a couple of things. What about the competitive compensation? So a lot of times we'll see businesses think they're competitive, but the information now is so ubiquitous that it meaning they can find, hey, we're benchmarked to 80% from compensation or 50% or whatever it is in the market. So really listening to your employees and also making sure if you haven't done a survey, whether that's you're selling your company and you need to make sure you keep those employees, those key employees, or you're acquiring a company, really understanding where the salaries sit in the market matters. So doing a survey, ensuring that you understand where those salaries and benefits land is really, really key. Because a lot of times we see a lot of people who are or a lot of companies who are like, well, how do I feel like it's very competitive, but once you actually go out there and the employees already know because they can look it up on Google or all these other platforms and see where they land from a compensation perspective. So it's all out there. It's just doing that survey and making sure you're on point with those.
Yeah, and I think it's Jason posted a great question that's very related to that. Is post-acquisition, how do you deal with employees who ask as a new owner for a raise? Happens all the time, and I think again in that effective early communication, I think you can address that up front. So one of the things that I would do is I would say that beforehand that the company would be looking to ensure that the current salaries are in line with the market. We'll be evaluating everyone in their position. So getting ahead of that, I think, is important. Ultimately, you're going to have those employees who ask for a raise, and by the way, some may deserve it. They could have been undercomped.
Yeah, I think you need to understand: are they a key employee? And if you're a new owner, hopefully that other who you're acquiring it from, you're able to get some insight into who the key employees are. If this is a key employee that's asking for a raise and maybe they weren't communicated by the previous employer, then that's a discussion they need to have, and goes to that second point of effective communication. Hey, we're evaluating, as John said, we're evaluating right now over the next month. We hear you, we want you, we know you're key to this organization. Let us come back to you with something that makes sense, so that but they need to be a key employee. If it's just if it's somebody who's not, then that's another conversation. So, and that goes to point 3, which is the performance management and even career development. Maybe they're a high potential but not ready for that promotion or raise. So hey, instead of investing on a raise, we're going to invest on a leadership development program or something in that line. So all of these work virtuously, or in a virtuous cycle, but really kind of key both on the, hey, if I'm selling a business, also if I'm acquiring a business, these are all key components to make sure that the M&A deal is set up for success.
And due diligence is where you want to flush this out. So part of your due diligence, you should be looking at every single employee, getting an understanding what their role is, where they're currently comped. That should knock out a lot of surprises that you may get on that. All right, let's move on to the next one. So Pete, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So, we get a lot of questions. Okay, how do I manage key employees through an ownership transition? And again, this could be both sides of it, meaning it could be, hey, I'm selling my business, so how am I starting? Like in order to make sure that sale is successful, because we do this in setting up companies, we want to make sure that many of the employees or the key employees are identified, and not only identified but communicated to that, hey, I'm looking to move on, I'm retiring, or it's time for me to take it to the next level and I need somebody else to come in and run it. But you're a key part of this. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. So on that side of it, it's really key to say, you're a big part of this. I want to make sure you're taken care of, making sure that their needs are met. And that's where that, not only communicating, but involving those key employees in the decision-making process, giving them reassurance, checking in with them as the process goes. You may even want to, if it's possible, involve them with the due diligence process. But it's really all about them being and feeling part of it, so that if you're that business that's selling your business, they feel really comfortable with the new ownership. New ownership feels really comfortable with them, and they know that they're that key employee. I think, as far as on the other side of it, if you're acquiring a business, these principles remain constant. Like, if you've acquired it, then you want to communicate immediately on what your plan is. If the plan is, we're evaluating everything, and we're really excited about taking this on, we don't see any big changes happening, we're in an observation phase, I think communicate that. If there's something different, because it's more of a, hey, we've got to rip some things out and we've got to grow some other things, I think you obviously have to be sensitive to that. But overall, like, you want to bring those key employees in, the people that know where the skeletons are, where everything is. You want to make sure you bring them in, make them feel comfortable, and reassure them and invest in them. If that's money, if that's training, if that's development, all of that is really, really key to making sure that all the employees feel comfortable. And we're currently seeing this, and how important it is to make all of these employees feel comfortable in this transition. And so these are really kind of the 5 things that we see, and launching a recognition and rewards program. A lot of that comes hand in hand with the development, personal development, and feedback loop with the group. I know there's some questions in here. Go ahead,
let's go. Courtney asked a great one. Does the list change? And I think this is related to the last list of retention. Does the list change at all for startups? For example, a new startup may not have health benefits. How do you retain members if you can't provide health insurance and things like reward salary plus comp? Yeah, so great question. So startups, it's kind of a unique breed. This is where I think the interview process becomes really key, because typically in a startup, someone that's coming in is giving up all the things that you get with a nice, safe, long-established company like health benefits, 401k matching, all of that. They're giving that up typically for equity. So there is a carrot that's dangled out a little further, right? So who you bring on has to be comfortable in that scenario. So I would say that the list doesn't really change. It's just more specific for the startup environment, where people are typically, who are coming in, are a little bit more risk tolerant. So strategies on that. So for instance, I've been involved with companies where we didn't have health insurance out of the gate. I was fortunate that I could go on my spouse's insurance coverage. So the other is talking to them about, do they have creative options for that? But again, I think it's really key to bring in people that are either used to that type of initial startup environment or comfortable in that. And I always say in startups, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's one aspect of it.
And I think on the health benefit side, I thought you had to provide it no matter what. You just don't have to pay for it.
Depends on the state. Depends on, right, a lot of variables there.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Daniel had a question, and Courtney, if there's more to that, I mean, I launched my own personal skincare line, and actually going through this right now with somebody I had launched it a number of years ago, but had gone through this with someone where we could not provide health insurance, but it was about equity and it was about getting creative, meaning we offered um, we offered her health insurance, but she had to pay for it. So that's where that came from. We wanted to offer it, but she still had to pay for it until the business got to a certain point where um, where we could pay for some of it or offer something there. And then your follow-up question for equity, what do you see as a typical vesting period, or do you provide equity right out of the gate? I mean, and I will tell you, like, I have horror stories about this. You have to have a vesting period, and you have to have the ability to claw the equity back at a certain price. So, meaning for the equity vesting period, I would always make it 4 years. You could make it whatever you want, and work with your attorney on that. But the piece that was a great piece of advice that I got very early on, this was about 5 or 6 years ago when I launched that startup, was having in the stock agreement, there was a piece in there where if for some reason they left, or they they got fired, or something happened, or just didn't want to be part of it, we had the option to buy it back at a certain price no matter what. And it's good for early stage, because you'll have people that will get really excited about, oh, I'm part of a startup, this is sexy, blah blah blah, and then when they get into it, it's really difficult, and then like, maybe this isn't for me, but they maybe were there for a year or two, and now they have half of that equity, that you're kind of like, geez, I really wish I could get some of that back. So there's a clause in there where you can claw some of it back. You have to pay them for it at a discounted price, but it's very worthwhile having that in there. And then Daniel, your question, how do you navigate a seller that doesn't want or allow you to interact with employees pre-close, especially in a service-oriented business? So it's interesting, we're working with a service-oriented business now, and for us, he was actually going to provide a kind of a big bonus structure immediately at close. And we had found out about that. We were consulting this group, but in finding that out, we basically said, okay, we want to retain these, or at least evaluate them, and have some kind of an agreement where you're on for a year. You don't get paid out on whatever you had with your owner, the previous owner. You don't get paid out on that until a year's out. And that was a negotiation in our consulting agreement that we were helping them negotiate that, where it was like, hey, you need to give us a year, give that group a year period, the buyer, to evaluate these employees, because again, they weren't able to talk to them, but the owner or the seller was basically like, well, they're going to get a big bonus, and that was an issue that we consulted on and said, hey, you need to keep them for a year, and then we'll still do the bonus, we'll put it in an escrow or whatever, but we want to evaluate the employees over a year, and if they don't work out, then we'll give them the bonus, or if for some reason there's an issue there, maybe they don't get the bonus. So there was a stipulation that we wanted to make sure that the buyer had in place to ensure that even if they couldn't touch base with the employees, some of which were specialists, plumbers or electricians, that that there was something in place that protected that in the agreement. So
yeah, and the one thing that I would add is where due diligence comes in. So Daniel, specific to this one, if the person isn't willing to let you have interaction, then I would ask, and I'd say, well, I'd like to see their job descriptions. I want to see their last performance reviews. And in many cases, you're probably not going to find that stuff, but that may give you some teeth to be able to talk. And then I would have an open conversation with that owner and say, well, what are you afraid of? Do you think they're going to jump ship? Do you think what is it that they're not comfortable with, and then try to sort through it if you can. But that's a tough one, no question about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of questions, John. I know you're going to take this one. We get a lot of questions of what do we do? What do you do if a key employee leaves? And I think that's on both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
If you're selling the business or if you just bought it, what happens?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing is take a deep breath, right? Don't panic. I've yet to see a key employee leave that took a business down. So everybody is replaceable. It can make things tough. In somewhat times, I've seen it make things easier. Everybody thought this person was key employee and the business can't go on without them. They left abruptly, and in some cases, it turned out to be the best thing. So exit interviews, I think, are essential if you can get them. And because sometimes you get the most honest feedback about what's going on in a business from people that have departed or are departing. And I always recommend, if you can, go back and find the last 5 people that left the company and see if you can get in touch with them and ask them for honest feedback as well. They're not always interested, but if you can, the exit interviews are, I think, critical at all stages of a company in getting that feedback of what's going on. If you can, and they do the right thing and they give you notice, then you've got to have a great knowledge transfer plan. So that is understanding what are the key things that they're doing, and then how do you get that knowledge transferred to somebody else? And my recommendation is to stay very, very close to that process. I've made the mistake in the past where I've handed that off to someone and said, "Hey, so and so's leaving. Can you get with them? They're gonna transfer everything you need to know over what we need to know." And that turned out to have all kinds of holes in it. And the recommendation that I would say there is that there's key tasks, there's domain knowledge, could be customer knowledge, and being involved in drilling into that is pretty important.
I think too, that is where, if they've decided to leave on their own, you're not letting them go or anything like that. It's a way that you can even say to them, "Hey, if I can keep you on for a couple more weeks so that you can really do this knowledge process with us, I'll throw in a little bit of a package for you." Because I think that's worth it, where, even if they've given you 2 weeks, just be like, "Look, if you can really work with us and get this, transfer all this knowledge process, customers, etc., like, we'll throw in an extra 2 weeks." I know it's a cost and you don't always want to do it, but it also allows for them to sign off on different things. Maybe you can reach out to them after they've left or things like that. So I think there's options there to incentivize them to do that knowledge process.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've seen is being transparent with the organization when someone's going to leave early is really important. So because it's going to get out no matter what you do, even if you ask the person to not say anything. So I recently went through this with a business and immediately held a town hall, and which I would do frequently, but allowed everybody to come in, announce that the person was leaving. And in doing so, they were extremely cooperative because we actually celebrated it, and it made them feel good about it. Everybody got to talk to them about why they were leaving, and the story could be crafted truthfully ahead of time. So again, I think it comes down to communication on that. Assessing the impact or evaluate the impact on the team and the organization as a whole. That's something that you're going to have to do to understand. Was this person really critical? If they are, can someone else pick up where they left off? Do you need to hire somebody quickly? How is the whole organization going to react to it? Doing that assessment. And then last and super important is don't be held hostage to domain expertise. A lot of times through a transition specifically, that person doesn't want to be there. If they don't want to be there, then you need to let them go and figure out a way to get the knowledge transferred. And if you don't have the knowledge, you can rebuild it. But keeping somebody in the organization that doesn't want to be there generally doesn't go well. So,
Okay, scroll
yeah,
down
I think we got a couple more questions. Let's take a look.
Jason, but scroll down too, because I think there's more.
I think that's the bottom one. Yeah, so Jason got buying a business. What discussions should I have with the current owner about keeping salaries where they are? If there's going to be a raise, should I reduce my valuation? I would. So valuations are usually based on companies being competitive in the market. So you have to understand those comp incentive plans or where that is, and
Well, it also eats into the discretionary earnings.
instantly, yeah.
So then, it would drop the valuation for sure. So I think it's just having that, if it's an amicable owner, which I would assume it would be, otherwise, or somewhat of a owner that's willing to share beyond, not all of a sudden be like, oh, I'm giving everybody raises the day before it's the transaction. Then yeah, I mean, if he's giving a raise in the process of due diligence or whatever, that needs to be disclosed. And then once it's disclosed, then, depending upon what it is and how big it is, then you take a look at it. But otherwise, I think you go back to evaluating their performance reviews if they have them. Are they a key employee? Like all of those things to make sure how valuable they are. If it's a huge raise, then yeah, definitely would reduce the valuation.
Yeah, it's going to affect your expense. And the other thing with if you are planning on doing raises but can't do them right away because maybe the cash isn't there, communicate again. Say, hey, in 3 months, we're going to be doing a full performance review and we're going to be reevaluating compensation at that time. If people know you have a plan for it, then you have a better chance of them coming along for the ride. So. All right.
Great.
So that's what we have. I don't see any other questions. Again, you can always reach out to us. Oh, there is one more. Okay, let's take a look.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. So yeah, if there's anything after, feel free to reach out. But we hope this was helpful and informative. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, find us on LinkedIn if you want, or reach out to us directly at our emails, Pete or John at movegroup.co. Thank you very much. Thanks, Courtney.